I'm going to go ahead and introduce Julio. So Dr. Julio Soto received his PhD in molecular and cell biology from the University of California, Berkeley. He's a professor in the Department of Biological Sciences here at San Jose State, and his publications include peer-reviewed articles in animal behavior as a senior undergraduate student, protein biochemistry, developmental biology, cancer biology, curriculum development, predictors of success in a first-year cell biology course, gains of students participating in a summer research program, and strategies that resulted in retention at Hispanic serving institutions. He's developed innovative courses and evaluation and assessments for his department at SJSU and for the Department of Education Title III grant for Texas State University. He managed an NSF Bio REU program, which was called the RUMBA program, research at undergraduates with molecular biology applications for 15 years here at San Jose State. He's also the only professor at SJSU that has received an education HHMI grant from the Howard Hughes Medical Institute. He was a rotating program director at EHRDUE at NSF from 2015 to 2016, and he received the 2013 Presidential Award for Excellence in Sciences, Mathematics, and Engineering Mentoring. That was the President of the United States, and there's a beautiful picture of him with President Obama receiving that award. He's returning to NSF this fall as a rotating program director at NSF at EHRDUE. And before he goes, he's literally starting, I think, next week. I conned him into coming here and sharing his expertise with us. Very happily, it appears that his presentation has just uploaded to a Google folder. So I'm going to reach over here, share it with me, download it, and then I will let Julio talk to you all.
Yeah, before I start, I will say that I'm going to be involved in two programs, the Hispanic Separate Institution program at NSF, and also the IU's program that deals with curriculum development, even department transformation. And if any of you or people that are looking through Zoom have any ideas and want to talk, I can do that. Obviously, I will not be managing any of the reviews, but I can give you feedback. I can meet with you through the phone or through Zoom and provide that help. Sometimes people have my experience doing that 5 years ago is that people have great ideas, but the execution is lacking, and that's sometimes the part that prevents somebody from getting funding. So again, I'm willing to help. Okay, so as Miri said, I began doing animal behavior as an undergrad. And for me, I didn't know what I wanted to do, and there was nothing else that was more related to medicine, which is any undergrad dream, go to medical school. But this professor gave me an opportunity, and I like the research more than I like going to medical school. I wrote a manuscript that he actually edited, and we ended up publishing the paper. And then went from there to protein biochemistry, developmental biology, cancer biology, and then really education research. And that I only have 6 years more to go, looking at the end of that tunnel. I think this is where my passion is. So I moved my research, I closed my lab in biology, and I'm developing all my time to look at student success. So this is why this topic is interesting. This topic gave me the job at NSF this year. Okay, the seminar is organized by different types of things. First, I'm going to be talking about attrition factors, found in the literature, interventions that increase student success, undergrad students, research experiences and success, investigation of the conditions that are effective in retaining undergrad students, a model as for a holistic approach to increase student success at the College of Science, and then funding opportunities. Okay, so this is my own definition. And when I look at my students and think about what do they need to succeed, graduation is not the only thing. I mean, they're gonna go to medical school or grad school, they need to have good grades. So for me, success has to do with a decrease in probation rates, improve overall GPA, increase STEM GPA, high graduation rates, and either enrollment in STEM graduate programs or medical programs, or employment in a STEM-related job after graduation. So most of the papers that deal with student retention and success use qualitative methods, so surveys, focus groups, interviews. And the problem with that is that you don't have any sense of whether any of the stuff they found through the survey or through the interview matches the reality of the data. So for me, using qualitative methods is not sufficient. And other articles then use theoretical models. The famous one is the one by Tinto. And most people, a great majority of researchers that look at student retention use that model to see whether their students fit the parameters in the model that Tinto published. And then there's an emerging number of studies that have to do with the had to do with socio-emotional factors and how that affects student success. For example, samples of these are size, science identity, growth mindset, grit, sense of belonging, mentor support. And they are validated instruments that people use to measure any one of these. And we're seeing that the newest literature has to do with this and how this affects those students. Next. Oh yeah, you're there. So attrition factors found in the literature. First generation, and I only put few references, there are a ton of studies that show that that is actually a metric. Financial aid, and that's another one. And I only put a reference and I put that one in because what these scientists, these researchers found is that the students that acquire loans to study, that activity shows a negative association with low persistence. High school performance, and I put an asterisk because there is mix. Some people's research shows that it has a predictive value, and some people show that it doesn't. The researchers that show that it doesn't demonstrate that what really matters is how they do in freshman college, not what they did in high school. Male URM, and I'm defining URM as how the federal government defines the URM: Black, Latino, Native American, and Pacific Islander, not Asian, because here they put it together and it is not, they're not underrepresented. Living off campus or living on campus, again, a mixed literature. Some people show that it makes a difference. You know, students make connections with their peers and the university if they live on campus. But I would say that most of the papers that I've read doesn't show that. There's no relationship between living on or off campus and being retained. Next. So students that increase student success, and since we're talking about science students, doing research makes a big difference. So the first paper is the Lobato paper with the HHMI student researchers. Then the paper by the group in University of Maryland, Baltimore, where they describe the Meyerhoff program and the results, the outcomes. And then the paper that I will present that was published in 2020. Then the next one is freshman seminar. And that show there is a lot of information that states that freshman seminar makes a difference. Academic advising, and obviously you're not gonna doubt that that's actually something that can increase student success. Academic coaching, which is not the same as academic advising. An academic coach helps a student to learn how to learn in that class. So let's say a student is third generation and went to a horrible high school. And Now he goes into chemistry and realizes that he needs to understand algebra in order to pass chemistry. An academic coach can say, okay, let me help you with that so you can succeed in that class. Or let's say they go into my class and realize that memorization of slides is not going to be effective because my questions are conceptual. So a coach can say, okay, if you just read the slides, which is what the students do, and you memorize the slide and what he said, and he's gonna ask you an application question, you're not gonna be able to answer that question. So a coach can say, okay, let's work on that. Mentoring, both by faculty mentors, and also by peer mentoring. Next. So now I'm gonna talk about an assessment of a model undergraduate research program at a Hispanic serving institution. Next. The program was called SURE. For STEM undergraduate research experience, this was done in the summer. I examined 3 cohorts. The 4th cohort was during the beginning of COVID, and the program completely changed, and you can compare apples and oranges. So only 3 years. So I developed the study evaluation instruments, analyzed the data, and wrote most of the article. I'm also the corresponding author on the citation shown there. Next. So a holistic undergraduate research program. And one important difference is that this was not managed in a College of Science. This was managed by an academic college called University College, and their goal is to help students succeed. I will explain. That made a huge difference. Usually when you have research in your labs, either by an NSF or an IH program, your goal is to give them the experience and hopefully convince them that science should be what they need to be doing. Your goal is not to help them move up or succeed, because for the most part, these programs accept potentially successful students. So the University College staff did the campus outreach, talking to students, talking to mentors, potential mentors. They were involved in student selection. The mentors there have to be trained. That was the only way they could get students, and they were paid for that. The grant paid for that, but they had to be trained. They had to be trained they had to get a mentor training, and they had to get a cultural competency training. The second component, the cultural competency, most of us don't share the students' backgrounds. If you look at your students here, for example, most of you may be students that came from a very poor high school. They're underrepresented. The social skills are not very well developed. They don't have the skills for the most part, they don't have the skills to succeed. So, but obviously, most of us, I'm including myself, didn't have that. I am a first generation college student in my family. My father only graduated from middle school. I have to work to go to college. So I understand that, but most faculty doesn't. They don't see that connection. Professional development was done by the staff in the college. The skills development was done in the research labs. They had a regional research symposium. So faculty programs from San Antonio, Austin, and Texas State were there to that symposium, and they presented posters, and there was a speaker. So having that, which is important to see that you're not the only undergrad that's doing research. It's not a national conference, it's a regional conference. So for some students, that was something that helped them. And then the ones that presented posters at conferences, the conference travel was paid, and then I provided the program evaluation. Next. So I'm gonna be talking about some differences. Obviously, I already talked about the program management done by not a department, a science department or a college or science and engineering department. The recruitment, I found that very interesting. They had what they call lightning rounds. So that was a night in the fall where potential faculty mentors and students met. And it was like speed dating, like 10 minutes. So they went from one-to-one until they found somebody that matched what their interest. That was very successful. The students liked it, the faculty liked it. They found the students that way. The selection was done by a two-tier process. The first tier selection was done by faculty mentors. The second tier selection was done by an advisory board. And for all my years of reviewing proposals at NSF and NIH, I've never seen an advisory board that's doing this, which is actually a good thing for that program. The cohorts were mixed, meaning that some of the students began research before the summer program and some during the summer program. The other thing is that the grant required the participants to be on financial aid. That was part of, because they were there, though they got a Hispanic Serving Institution grant from the Department of the Education. They were afraid that if you only wanted underrepresented Hispanic students, that was going to be a legal issue. So they included the students that were on financial aid. And that includes all kinds of students. Then the mentor training at the cultural competency, this was done by the National Research Mentoring Network. The network is housed in Wisconsin. They pay their people to come to universities to give that training. They also have evaluation instruments. You can also send 2 or 3 people to Wisconsin to get trained, and they become the trainers of the college. And then the evaluation of undergraduate research skills. And usually when people use a self-assessment instrument, either the students that are doing really well are gonna score themselves lower, and the students that are doing poorly are gonna score themselves higher. So a self-assessment instrument is useless. So in this case, I developed an instrument that the mentors use to evaluate their own students. So the methods for the paper that I'm presenting, pre and post program surveys is I was evaluating the program. 2 questions about science identity from the Strata 2011 instrument. Mid-program students research evaluated by faculty and not a self-assessment instrument. So the faculty did this at the midpoint. Midpoint means July 1st. Then they discussed the results with their students. And actually that was one of the things that when I talked to the students, they actually agreed that was a benefit. And then a year after the summer program, we compared the overall and the STEM GPA for those students that participated in the summer program versus a control group. A control group had the same GPA as the students that were selected, the same demographics, the same gender, the same major. So they were equal beginning that. So the demographic actually matched the cohorts. And then at the end of this, I did focus group interviews with students and mentors. And as I said, sometimes you get information that can show you that whatever you collect as a piece of hard data is actually real. Sometimes you get things that you never expected, but it's useful. So there was no difference between the science identity of the students that began the program at the end of the program. And I will say something about this. The Strata instrument is about 24 questions and accessory questions. It is a long survey. And the advisory board didn't want us to use the entire instrument. So I picked 2 questions and hopefully I will see something, but obviously I didn't. So maybe the reason for not seeing a difference is that the whole instrument wasn't used. Again, this is when you work for somebody else and they tell you, yeah, we're not doing that. I still wanted the data, so next. So these are the mid-program research skills. So we examine independence, writing ability, presentation skills, achieve established goals, can troubleshoot, self-motivation, organization, attended and participated lab meetings, works well with others, And you can see the rest. Basically, these are things that as scientists, with our students, we expect them to be good at after that training period. My hypothesis was the students that began earlier were gonna have higher scores, and they didn't. The students that began earlier and the students that began in early June have no differences between the rating from the faculty mentors. Again, I found that interesting. And you can assume or say that whatever the new students gained in that summer was sufficient to match the ones that began in the previous fall or the previous spring. Now, how about the GPA? The GPA, and so I'm gonna, for those of you that are here, the comparisons were done between the post cohort a year later and the control group 1 year later. So the overall GPA for those students was higher significantly compared to the ones that were in the control group. The pre, which is this one, there was no difference between this and this. So that was the first before they joined the program. Now, and then we counted the number of students we had higher GPA and the students that had lower GPA a year later. And the students in the cohorts have higher GPAs than the one in the control group. We found the same results with the STEM GPA, higher than the control groups. Obviously, there are differences, but the p-values were good. The same thing with the increase or lower STEM GPA. So computer science, math, physics, chemistry, biology, the students came from both engineering and sciences. Engineering. So the students that were in the cohorts had a higher number of students with increased GPA compared to the control group. And then the impact. So this was only after 3 years. 52% had graduated. The 48% were still in college. And for this, I always, there's data that suggests that students that do research as a freshman or sophomore, that is a greater impact than students that began research later. The students that do research as a junior or senior, they know what they want to do. The students that you get as a freshman, rising sophomore, rising junior, maybe they don't. So the exposure of research actually makes a difference. Anyway, so 55% of them are working on STEM-related fields. Austin has a great technology district, so most of the students were working in those companies. 39% were in grad school, and then 6% were in unrelated STEM jobs. So as a conclusion for this first part, so the outcomes of this program actually resemble the outcomes from the Meyerhoff program, which is a national model for undergrads. And the other thing is that the explicit intention, that's true for the Shore and the Meyerhoff, is not to just expose students to the research, but to increase student success. So higher GPA, higher overall and higher STEM GPA, admission into grad program. So that you see, if you read the Meyerhoff program, that's what you get if you're selected. And then the placement of the program in a non-academic college ensure that interventions could be implemented to maximize success. So whatever they see a problem with issues, there are social issues or financial issues or class issues, they were able to just target that and help them out. Now, this is the work that I did with the same institution, but we're looking at both retention conditions and 4 different strategies that were implemented. So the objectives of the study were to investigate demographic characteristics associated with academic attrition, academic interventions delivered by Texas State that increase student retention, and then from our college, Suleika and did created a predictive model for probation. And I will show you the model that was published in the paper too. As the same one, I developed the study, analyzed the data, and grown most of the paper. So the first method, so the sample size for the Texas State fresh entering class was over 17,000 students. And think about looking at all the files. Fun. That I spent like 3 months looking at the data. So types of data, they collected 7 potential attrition factors, and these factors were found in the literature. First generation, gender, ethnicity, financial aid, high school performance, living on or off campus, and enrolling 13 units or less. And in that institution, 13 units or less, meaning that they're not fully enrolled. And then 4 academic interventions were implemented: freshman seminar, peer mentoring, academic advising, and academic coaching. And then those people that were paid and trained by national standards collected the times they were visited by a student. So when I got the data, obviously I didn't want to see the names. I just wanted to see the numbers and how many times they participated in any of the interventions. So the analysis was done to compare the non-retained group, group 1, and the retained group, group 2. Unfortunately, this university, that college, and what they did here, they had no notes on the discussion. So there was no qualitative data associated with the numbers. It was just, we got the numbers, who were retained and who were not, but we couldn't match that with an exit interview. That never happened. So we didn't have that information. So I used 2 sample t-tests to compare passing or failing the freshman seminar and the minimum number of academic interventions between group 1 and 2. And then use chi-square test of independence to determine which risk factors were related to attrition. Now I'm showing you this, and the interesting thing here is that this university has the highest retention of freshmen that I've seen. I mean, even students from Berkeley, they get 50% retention after freshman year. This college, this university has a high retention rate. And again, when I looked at the data, I only began looking at after all those strategies were implemented, not before. So 78% were retained, cohort 1, cohort 2, 78%, cohort 3, 77%. Then the not retained students, the students that were on probation for a year and then disqualified, 10% for year 1, 11% for year 2, 11% for year 3. And then the unknown status that you see on the table are students that had good grades, but left. So we don't know whether they left because they couldn't financially support their college or because they transferred to a different institution. So we have no idea what they did, but we had to report the numbers. So that's what we got. So risk factors. And so the first value, the EFC, that's financial aid. That is the amount of money a parent can provide to support their kids' education. So $2,000 or less, so that's financial aid. So for cohort 1, that was a significant factor. You see the p-value there. First generation status was also a significant attrition factor, and you see that there. And for the first cohort, enrolling 13 units or less was also significant. For the cohort number 2, 2017 to 2018, financial aid, first generation, high school performance, and registering 13 units or less. For cohort 3, there were only 2 attrition factors with significant values, financial aid and first generation. So those 2 are common in between those 3 cohorts. And then we wanted to see whether the relationship was dependent or independent. So for the first 2 cohorts, what we found has an independent relationship, which means that there is something else that they experience that helped them, I say it this way, that resulted in them not being retained. We don't know what that was because we don't know that wasn't collected. And then the third cohort with the two risk factors, that was a dependent relationship. So for that cohort, that was sufficient for them to be disqualified. So for academic interventions, and something about this freshman seminar. So this is taught by faculty from the entire university in a rotation basis. They have to read a book, and the book usually is about cultural differences or racial differences, written for a college student, not for an expert. So the book can discuss the present chapters, but then they have people, the support group that I'm going to mention in just the peer mentor, the advising, and the coaching. They were there from the beginning. And the other thing they did was a financial aid training. The whole thing that I'm working because I need to, or I'm working because I like my gadgets, I like my tech, or a new car. So that was discussed there. So the students that failed the freshman seminar were had a high percentage of failing or not being retained. So I would say that I forgot to mention, we didn't look at transfer students, we only look at freshmen, entering freshman students. That population is messy. Number-wise, how do you target those and not the others? Number of interventions, this is a minimum number. So 3 for peer mentoring, so 3 times they saw their peer mentor. 2 times for academic coaching and 3 times for advising. This is the first cohort. The second cohort has the same characteristics. The third cohort, those students needed just to see their coach and advisor twice. And again, this is a year after they became on probation. These students were able to be retained. And then the statistical relationship. So independent for, and now we're looking at retention or attrition for the first cohort. And I'm beginning, it could be that there's something else that helps those students to be retained, and maybe sense of belonging, maybe in being involved with activities, with groups. We have no idea because that wasn't collected. Then for the other 2 cohorts, the combination of those 3 was dependent. So that was sufficient for them to be able to be retained. And I'm switching to biology, and I wanted to know whether the same factors were found in our students. And so Suleika did this. So Suleika did the whole thing when it comes to this. I couldn't do it, she could. So you go to an expert and they say, this is what I want to see, and can you do it? So the chair got the data from the university. We looked at 739 students, academic years 14, 15, 15, 16, 16 to 17. She used a binomial logistics regression to create the model, the probation model. And then the variables were ethnicity, the same thing I mentioned before, gender, native, basically the students that began as a freshman versus the transfer students, eligibility to receive financial aid, because as the university collects that, whether they receive financial aid or they went through the process is different, but at least they could do it. So again, this is just the eligibility. SAT and SAT scores, another university doesn't collect that at this point. They used to, so she looked at that. Full-time versus part-time. Age groups is, a lot of our students are not 17 or 18 years old. Some of them are older. We looked at that, and pass-fail of the freshman chemistry sequence, the biology freshman sequence, and genetics, because those 3 lines of courses are problematic. And I'm going to use that, I'm not going to use what people call them. Okay, so what she found is that the SAT score was predictive of probation. And again, we're not collecting that anymore. Gender, but I'm going to show you in the next graph what gender category was really a predictive gender. Age group was not um, a predictor. URM was a predictor or is a predictor. Being transfer or being beginning freshman here is not a predictor, which is surprising, but it wasn't. And then passing or failing the freshman sequence in chemistry, freshman sequence in biology, and the genetics course. So those are predictors for probation. And then what she found is that the male URMs in biology are the ones that have a higher propensity to be on probation. Not the females, but the males. So that male URM category is, you see that commonly in research literature that deals with student retention and success. So what can we do? What can be incorporated from what I show you? And I'm sure that Shelley is doing this. Develop a study that helps us understand what strategies can be implemented as a state to reduce the number of social science students on probation and disqualification. And this should incorporate both qualitative and quantitative measures. Interviewing someone that's actually on probation to see what's happening is really sometimes very helpful. The study and that the second and third points could be issues for people. Don't come with preconceived biases. And if you talk to some of my peers and the Department of Biology, say, oh, the student doesn't belong here, they should go to art or they should go to humanities. And I always say, show me the data. Don't give me an anecdote for one or two students. That's a preconceived bias. So the data will tell you where the issues are. That's the best thing. And then the third point, don't be tempted to justify simplistic solutions based on student deficit models. The whole notion of the students don't belong here, they can cut it, that's a student deficit model. Again, we know all of you that are on Zoom and here, we know that we don't serve Stanford or Berkeley students. We serve students from a diverse population that were taught in different school settings. And that's our population of students. This is from looking at the data from the biology exit interview that students survey what they get when they graduate. And sense of belonging is a huge issue. I felt that I never belong at the university. For some people, they can say, I'm gonna do it, I'm gonna make it. Some students, that's a big factor. So since we know we cannot add another course, basically a freshman seminar, what we could do is to implement an onboarding activity as summer orientation. You connect a student, either freshman or transfer, with an academic advisor, with a mentor, a peer mentor, and an academic coach. And so that's actually a system of support that you provide from the beginning. So whenever they need help, either from a peer or from the faculty mentor or the peer mentor, they can get that help because they have a connection with people. And then again, include non-academic sessions. I mean, really, the whole notion that you work to get a gadget is an option, it's a choice. And sometimes students don't understand how, when you look at the interest rates, how is that going to mortgage your future? When I talk to students, I always ask that, are you working? Yes. Why? And you get all sorts of answers, but the idea of mortgaging, because I don't understand the interest that I have to pay on that bill, is drastic. And the other thing that I would say is that develop a team of trained professionals that can increase student success. And I would say this for people that think academic advising is the end all. It isn't. Academic advising is not sufficient to increase student success. I mean, we have COSAR for years, funded by NSF. So our students got advising from freshman, transfer, and then to one of us. If you look at the success rate of those students, did it increase? No, it didn't. So academic advising, and every time I read something about the university, LDX in academic advising, that's not gonna increase the numbers. What I read and what I experienced, when I was doing the work at Texas is that holistic interventions, when done by trained professionals, are more effective. So national training of strategies, peer mentoring, at least there is done using the College Reading and Learning Association training materials, also by internal peer educational training program certification. So those students are certified to do this before they actually talk to a student. Academic coaching, so these are grad students, 80 units of training a year, and they do deal with two things. How do you succeed in college and then get a job that is meaningful to you? And then what are the strategies that will help you pass that course that you're having trouble with? So the coaches were course specific, not just I'm gonna hire a coach, but they don't know how I teach my course or genetics is taught. You need somebody that has that course specific experience. Academic advising, National Academic Advising Association, core competencies. And I don't know what COSAC does with their staff, their trained staff, but this is what they did here. And also the faculty were trained. And just remembering the first year when I was here, they said, well, you're gonna advise these students. I was like, what? What do I need to do? What are the 40, now that at least we have 4-degree plans and 5-degree plans, what year should they take? I mean, they ask you all those questions and you have no idea. As a new hire, that is a problem. People should be trained to provide academic advising. And then they call cultural competency mentor training. Again, you need to, if you're dealing with a student, you have to be trained as a mentor and you have to be trained with the cultural competency. All of us have PhDs, none of us got training in mentorship. Either you had a great mentor or you had a horrible mentor. And in your experience, you said, I'm not gonna do that because I was horrible. I'm gonna do this other strategy, which I think is very helpful, but we were never trained. It really makes a difference. So this is something that I created for the College of Science. And so the first part, which is the freshman orientation with the transfer orientation, since we cannot add a course, we cannot add a freshman seminar, what we could do is to create that network of people that are going to help the student at the orientation. So that is done by pairing a faculty mentor, a peer mentor, a coach, and an advisor with an entering student. So from the beginning, they say, okay, I belong here. They're going to support me. They're going to help me out. That makes a difference. So that's what I call onboarding, summer onboarding activity. And then, and I'm sure some of these Shirley's working on, but not being her brain, I had mentioned some of these. Develop a student success council. So obviously she will be the chair as Associate Dean for Student Success, but you have people from different departments to talk about what's working in their departments, but also include the coaches and the peer advisors. And the whole thing is to maximize and to expand the lessons they learned. Then cultural competency, and again, for everyone, not just faculty, people that deal with students. And then on the other part, target problematic courses. So we know what courses they are. They have LAs, but LA is not a peer mentor, and LAs could be very successful or not. I think for this institution, we need the LA, we need the peer mentor, and we need the coach in those courses. And sometimes with some courses, some of the courses have to be redeveloped. Again, don't kill the messenger. And then hopefully with that, you see that you'll see a reduced number of students on probation, an increase overall and STEM GPA, especially if they learn how to study for those courses, and then increase graduation rate. So if you meet any of these goals, it's actually a good thing. So funding the strategy is presented in the model. The summer onboarding strategy and the academic coaching can be provided by an HSI NSF proposal. The peer mentoring training, I know the Dean of Undergrad Studies has a peer mentor program. see what they do, see where they can train some of our students to become peer mentors in science. Academic advising, again, what I mentioned before, COSAC is now part of the whole university orientation system, but you need to train faculty that are gonna do that in years 3 and 4 or 5. And then the cultural competency training, that could be done by diversity officer on campus. That's her area of expertise. And so that could be done by her, but everybody has to do it. You know, again, it really makes a difference. NSF, unlike the Department of Ed, only funds projects that help science students. The HSI program at the Department of Ed funds the whole institution to help all the students. In this case, NSF is not interested in all the students. NSF is only interested in science students. So faculty involved in the writing of the proposal and managing the funded project must be science faculty. It could not be an environmental studies faculty. It cannot be somebody from humanities. It has to be a science group of people. And then the optics. A Latino faculty should be involved in this. Again, he's a Hispanic. And when you review his proposals and you see basically all white, all male, I always find that a red flag. So when I review and I see that, I gave them a poor rating because I don't see the connection. So you need to have somebody that's Latino in that proposal. And then the logistics, actually a pilot program is better. And for example, because I'm biased, you can use the Department of Biology because we have a probation model and say, okay, we're gonna test this. That if we do X, Y, and Z, can the rate of probation and then disqualification reduce? It's a 3-year program, you only fund one department and you fund the people that are gonna do the parts. So then after that, after the 3rd year, then you submit a proposal for the entire college, hopefully with the things that work in the pre-proposal. So something about implementing strategies, they must be tailored to our students. If you look at the research on student retention, the context makes a big difference. What they did was students that had a private college in the Midwest is not gonna have the same issues that we have here. The context makes a difference. And then avoid the use of student deficit model to justify simplistic solution. For example, academic advising plus. And my experience, both as an NSF and an NIH reviewer, and as a program director for NSF, is that proposals that don't target their issues are not funded. Also, the proposals that use student deficit models to explain what was happening, they don't get funded either. Next slide. So these are the acknowledgements. Dr. Brown was the University College Dean at that point. He hired me. I met him 20 years ago when I basically was in the hiring committee for his position in Texas. But he became a dean, and so he hired me to do the assessment. And I learned a lot from my experience. I was also paid really well. That's the plus side of doing that sort of job. And now he's the provost and vice president for academic affairs at Lamar University in Texas. Nick Weimer was the data computer person. So I need data from these cohorts. I need this data. I need it now. And he did. I said, I want you to eliminate these numbers. Transfer students, for example. But so he was able to manage the data so I can use it. Zuleika, one of my first office mates here, she developed the probation model. Every time I have something with statistics in one of my papers, she's co-author because she can tell me what to use and what not to use and what did not make any sense. Miri and Shelley, and this was for this position, the university had to provide 10% of caution. So the funny thing is because we had a meeting, the question is, why would we have to pay them to have you work for them? That's how they hire you now. So 10% cost sharing, Shelley and Miri were able to find a solution to that problem. And then the provost and the vice provost provided a mechanism to support that cost sharing. So that's my picture with the president. Well, actually, one of them, the other one is at home with the signature.
Thank you so much, Julio. You can actually have like our first real round of applause in several years, so.
Do you have any questions, any comments?
So maybe we can, ask if anybody both in the room and if anybody in our Zoom group have any questions. If you have a question from Zoom, just go ahead and put it in the Q&A. And then I'll invite you to speak. And if you have a question in the room, raise a real hand. Daryl.
For the SurePrep program in Texas State, I don't know more, how did they match those students with the faculty? Did they rate student rate 1, 2, 3, their choices, and the faculty, and then follow the advisory board?
So
You repeat the question.
the question is about the short program and how the selection was done. So they had that lightning round of introducing mentors and potential mentees. And so that helped the mentors to select, okay, I would like I said, 3 students that were interested in that person's research. I find this person to be better than the other. So I'm selecting this one, let's say number 1. And then the advisory board then have to do with what the proposal was asking us to do, which is what impact. And for me, it was like, don't pick, and that was the fight after the first year. Don't pick students that you know are gonna make it regardless, because your impact is minimal. Pick students that you think can be helped by having that experience and go with that. So the second year, when they have that, then the advisory board then collected the application form had all of that, plus the references. And they could say, okay, I know she likes or he likes number 1, but within number 2 fits the program better. And the faculty agreed that whoever the advisory board was going to pick for them, that was the student that we're going to get. A lot of not fighting, because I didn't see that. When I asked the question, how is it working? Do you guys, the mentors, are you guys having issues with what the advisory board selects for you? And most of them said no, because they had narrowed the number to a number they could say, I'll be happy with either one, but I prefer number 1. The question is, I mentioned that in this program, it was important that the program was done by a non-academic college, like not a college of science. That's interesting, because if you want to increase the success of our students, you maybe want to have that managed at the associate dean level here, not elsewhere. That's my guess, but it's a difficult thing. But I think the idea that, for example, Shelley's role is to help students succeed. Maybe having her involved in that, or having some sort of support or acknowledgement that the students need help besides being exposed to research, may make a difference.
I teach science to student success in the College of Science. And I really hope that we can learn more and work together about how to make students not fail their first semester in college.
Well, Mary can give you my email. you can email me. I'm hoping that people in the college are interested in running a proposal for us, for NSF. And then I can just have Zoom meetings with all of you and say, okay, what are you thinking? Show me the data that supports your idea, which is the important part. Do you have data that supports the implementation at a large scale of what you're proposing? And then I can tell you, I can predict what the outcomes will be based on the people that I know there and basically based on the potential reviewers. I'm willing to help. That's what I'm saying. I'm willing to help. If I didn't begin on Monday, then I would say, I will write a pre-proposal and somebody can take care of it. I don't have to be acknowledged, but as a rolling the ball, that would be what I would do. But I cannot do that.
Okay, so does anybody on Zoom have questions? And by the way, can you guys hear me when I'm talking since I don't have the microphone? Okay, so Julio, do you want to ask if anybody on Zoom has questions?
Yes, anybody in Zoom have any questions or any comments about what I presented today?
We have one from Sonia, Julio, from here. Is that Steve? Can you, yeah, come on. Can you explain about the undergraduate research component, what shape it has, the bibliography research work? And actually, maybe you better just repeat that because they may not be able to hear me now with the microphone.
So let me just rephrase what she wrote. Can you describe what the research component was? And doing a bibliography really can be counted for that. I would say no, you really have to be hands-on. I mean, you're not gonna interest a student by doing a literature review on a topic that you're interested, but they may not be. It has to be hands-on.
During this academic for creating a consultant training. One of the my experience with students here, integration, or financial aid, all of that. So they're going to go up and do the mentorship.
So that's a great question. This question has to do with what is in the mentor training and cultural competency training. So there are two different components, the two different trainings. The mentor training, it helps you with, I hate to use the same word, mentoring. So what things are gonna help your student to help you with your research, which are not do this and do that, I'll see you tomorrow. Troubleshooting, I mean, there is some technical things that you learn as a potential mentor. And then even how to pick students, how to provide evaluation that's helpful and not negative. How the student can incorporate that feedback can be successful in your research endeavors. The cultural competency has to do with everything else. The issues with ethnicity, issues with culture, issues with the idea that you don't belong here because you are not of the main group or because you went to a poor school. To be honest, I didn't take that training. I provided the mentor training for the first cohort, but I told them you need to hire them because they're the experts. I'm doing what I'm used to do with my students. So I have not taken that, but I think the whole idea of the cultural competency is to help you maybe better understand your students.
Well, on that note, we are running a little late, so I'm going to go ahead and thank Julio for coming out and giving this talk despite significant technical difficulties. Thanks so much, Julio.